Thank you. Bill, does the proposal for this amendment to the ordinances tonight approve those undeveloped lots for building?
It would. At least it would, if I could step back, it waives the requirement that they have frontage on a public right-of-way other than an alley. So it would waive that single requirement.
But other requirements remain?
All the requirements related to improvement of the alleyway, fire access requirements, setbacks, zoning code standards, all the other standards that apply to all the other lots in that zoning district would still apply. All it would do is waive this one provision that would state essentially, every building hereafter erected has to abut a public street, which is the impediment to being able to develop the property. So it is waiving that single standard for the undeveloped lot, or for any developed lot, should a structure be destroyed, is going to be in that similar situation.
Mr. Mayor.
Walter.
So, therefore, public input would not be precluded with the exception of the street width question. Is that correct?
Generally in the development process, if we're looking at an undeveloped lot or a structure is destroyed and it's going to be reconstructed, the property owner would just apply for a building permit, and that building permit would be reviewed to ensure that it meets all standards and requirements underneath the code, and if it does, then that building permit would be issued. So there is not a public input process in the review or issuance of a building permit.
That So if I understand, the process then would not preclude public input, it just wouldn't be part of the process, and effectively precluded, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would hesitate to say that there is a public input process in the building permit stage. I mean, somebody can protest and challenge a permit issuance. They can protest it based upon if they think it was improperly issued because it didn't meet a standard. There is an appeal process in that instance, but there is really not a public input process that is intertwined in the building permit and construction stage. At that point, the presumption is, like every other property in that zoning district, they have all the same property rights. They can have all the same uses that are allowed in that zoning district, and presuming that this is the one impediment and it is waived due to its prior approval of the lot, then it would just be a building permit like any other lot in that neighborhood or any neighborhood in town.
Mr. Mayor, one final question. I'm reluctant to ask this one, but I'm going to. Is this an end around?
Is it a what?
An end around.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Your Honor,
I think Rod understands.
no, the idea was that there was an issue that was presented on a variance process for a couple pieces of property. When I looked at it, I saw that this underlying issue, that we couldn't proceed that way, but then we found out there was a bigger problem within the city, and I didn't look at it with any particular lot in mind and figure out how would you solve this for the city. And basically we tried to use the concept of fundamental fairness, trying to treat similar lots similarly. And so when we came up with the idea for the ordinance was what's one way to be able to make sure that these properties have the rates that their neighbors enjoy. And there was an impediment on access, and the city's going to make sure that there is access to those properties and that there's fire access services, that all the other rights or other health and safety issues are addressed.
I have a question for you, Rod, and I think it was answered, but it might help the council out here, too. We were talking about 36 lots. Some of those lots have things built on them, some do not. Out of these 36 lots, a house or whatever burns down. Person cannot rebuild or is restricted to rebuild, or how will that be? The way that it's currently wrote right now is because it's a non-conforming lot or non-conforming use. Is that correct?
Correctly. I mean, technically under Section B, if that lot does not abut a public street, then a building would not allow to be erected on that lot. And so they would not be able to reconstruct their residence if it's destroyed more than 70%, which is the standard underneath the zoning code. That if it's destroyed more than 70%, then anything that's erected or happens after that point has to comply with all the provisions of the zoning code. So, and quite honestly, it doesn't have to, a structure doesn't have to be destroyed for that to have an impact. You can just go through refinancing on a property, and a bank wants to see a rebuild letter, and if we cannot issue one that says that should it be destroyed, it can be reconstructed, that can compromise the ability to finance a property as well. So, I mean, you don't have to actually have a catastrophic loss for a non-compliance to have an impact upon a property. It can occur in other ways, but the way the code reads today, should a structure be destroyed more than 70%, and it doesn't meet that standard of abutting something other than an alley, then it could not be allowed to be reconstructed underneath the zoning code. And if we cannot grant a variance to alleviate that, then there's really no other way to address that rather than a legislative change.
And there's a number of these lots that we're talking about that do have, in fact, buildings on them.
Yes, we had identified 34.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear. Tom?
So it seems like the ordinance serves those 34 lots really well, in that if there's a fire, if there's a destroyed building, there's some opportunity for those people to either refinance or rebuild or whatever it might be. But it also sounds like there's a situation potentially with 2 lots that we can't talk about specifically because the situation in a public hearing is we can't be specific about specific properties. And it sounds like that condition is frustrating for some people that want to speak about it and can't. And I think it's also frustrating for council members that need to make a decision on this and can't talk about it. And it makes me uncomfortable. My preference would be that we treat these as 2 separate issues. It seems like we have a situation with we have almost 2 situations here that we're trying to do with one ordinance. And that's what I'm trying to,
Gary, you want to address that, please?
I just want to,
Rod?
yeah, I want to
Clarify it.
figure out what's going on.
Yeah, having read the attorney's letters that he wrote to, or they wrote to Planning and Zoning Commission, I understand the point. But if you had one of the 34 lots that the improvements were to burn, or were to be destroyed, they would be in exactly the same position as any undeveloped properties that might be subject to this ordinance. It's exactly the same situation. What you have here is a different legal process that was pursued to begin with that has now been remedied to deal with the whole issue, yes, to deal with the entire issue of the nonconforming use or nonconforming lot. So although the folks who've testified want to testify about those particular incidents, and they may have some probative value, it is not dispositive as you consider this ordinance. You need to consider it on a community-wide basis for all of the properties that might be affected.
Bill?
Wayne?
Obviously, the discussion is about 2 undeveloped lots. My question would be, my assumption is that these lots, these 2 undeveloped lots, were in fact part of the plat back in 1927. Yes?
Look for that's correct.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the issue of spot zoning, where in a particular zoning district, we establish special uses for an area that is not applied to the rest of the properties around it. That would be a spot zoning. What it seems to me we have here is a reverse spot zoning, where we're trying to preclude certain uses on a property that are allowed in surrounding uses. And it also occurs to me that should one of these other developed properties burn down or otherwise be destroyed, now they're an undeveloped property and could not be redeveloped similarly. And I think writing code around specific uses that do not apply universally across all the other uses in the same zoning district is unfair and not an appropriate thing to be doing. In the whereas clause number 1 that was mentioned, it says specifically, Moscow has previously approved the creation and development of several building lots that do not front upon a public street right-of-way. That indicates that the city did have in mind that these lots would be developed as building lots eventually. The fact that a current alley is substandard does not mean that it won't be brought up to standards and is not significantly different, in my mind, from a flagpole access to other lots, and in fact is at 20 feet is larger than some of the access to existing properties that are built. And with that provision, along with the other provisions that the private access easement or other legal means should provide safe and convenient access for servicing fire protection and required off-street parking, pretty much covers the needs of a property being developed and built upon. So to my mind, this is the simplest, easiest way to approach the issue to allow the use of land that's in a particular zoning district without going over the edge and precluding property owners from the same legitimate uses of their property that anybody else in that same district enjoys.
Bill?
John?
I agree with everything Art said. With me, it comes down to the fairness for all of the lots that are involved, so that if something does happen, you can either get refinancing yourself, or someone that might want to buy your property can get financing for it. As it stands now, that would be very difficult. So, and then the other part is that we have got 36 lots. We don't have 34 lots and 2 lots. We've got 36 lots. Treat them all the same. And as long as all of the code provisions, as far as water, sewer, entrance, egress, fire, and all of that are met by whoever is going to either develop those lots or just let them sit, I think that we have pretty much done the job that we're being asked to do. And I support this and would make a motion at this point that we accept the proposed amendment of Title IX, Chapter 6, to allow an exemption to lot frontage requirements for existing lots of record, and that we do it with the under suspension of the rules for 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
And I'll second that, as long as we remember it's Title IV and not Title IX.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And then if I can do some discussion here.
Continue.
Does that meet all the requirements for a motion?
I'll restate it, John, once we're done discussion.
So, I just wanted to mention that the fact that if allowing building on platted lots, it promotes infill, which, we've always talked about smart growth for, however long I've been on council. That's been one of the things is everybody trying to promote infill. And like Art said before, when a plat is approved, whether it's in 1875 or 1927 or now, those lots are considered developable. I mean, whether it was a bad decision at that point, it's still those are still considered developable, and I think that we need to be fair in allowing somebody that use of their property, and everybody else has an equal use of that zone in that area. I think that we need to make sure that we're being fair in allowing that use.
Wayne?
Seems like over the last year or 18 months that this council has gotten caught up in having to repair problems that have been created over the past number of years because of different zoning and different ordinances and the creation of different plats. And I see that this is another situation where the city needs to take care of some housekeeping. I think there were some bad decisions that were made in years past. If you want to talk about all these 36 lots that are not fronting on a street, that was probably a bad decision at the time. But what's done is done, and what's fair is fair, and what's equal is equal. And so that's why I will support John's motion.
Walter?
While I am sympathetic to the neighbors of the two undeveloped lots, I agree with what a couple of other council people have said, that how can we say that 34 developed lots need legal access per code and two undeveloped lots do not? I just think that to pass it for 34 means we need to pass it for 36. Like I say, I understand the neighbors, not fully understand all of their reasons, but I understand the fact that they're not really tickled about it. I accept the council's comment regarding the end-around question and appreciate it. So I will support the motion.
Other discussion? Okay, what we have before us is we have a motion to approve the ordinance and the proposed amendment of Title 4, Chapter 6 to allow an exception of a lot street frontage requirements of existing lots of record, that this ordinance be approved under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. That's how you have it? Everybody's on the board, and this motion was made by John, seconded by Dan. The roll will start with Art.
Aye.
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 No.
Aye.
Okay, that ordinance passes 5-1. 5 ayes and 1 no. And that ordinance number is?
2014-18.
Okay. What we have before us is ordinance number 2014-18, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code, Title 4, Chapter 6, Section 3, allowing the amendment of the required access to lots and buildings for the previously approved lots of record, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law.